Welcome to this web project for comparative higher education at Illinois State University. This is a summary review of the text Weaving Success by Megan Lindow. She is an award-winning author commissioned by the Partnership for Higher Education in Africa. She spent over a year traveling to each of the 9 countries that received funding support. The text was released at the Third World Innovation Summit on Education in Doha by the Institute of International Education in 2011, and it is free to download from the internet. It is one part of a trilogy, starting with a case study of the 10-year funded collaborative initiative in 2000, when nations were implementing democratic and economic reforms, followed by a detailed retrospective of accomplishments and weaving success. The agenda for this presentation is to place Africa in context, starting by listing the 9 countries and the collaborative foundations that started with 4 and grew to 7, and to introduce the complex concept of triple helix in a simplified format, demonstrating that that is the model that was used by the Partnership for Higher Education in Africa. Its main scope is to advance the scientific knowledge and practical achievements related to the academy, industry, and government interactions to foster research, innovation, entrepreneurship, and sustainable development. The premise of the triple helix is to harness resources for commercialization by capitalizing on knowledge of universities and national labs. And it was quite a sizable investment indeed. From this chart, we can see that the Carnegie Foundation provided $12.6 million annually for a decade. Ford, Carnegie, Rockefeller, Mellon, and MacArthur provided the bulk of the contribution. Overall, $440 million from 7 foundations invested in the African Partnership to 25 regional training research networks. The author provides chapter themes for each of the countries, each with its own languages, social customs, and culture. Much of the information in this presentation may be viewed in Chapter 2 on pages 12 and 13. More often than not, Egypt and its polar opposite South Africa are portrayed in modern multimedia. More recently, Nigeria and Kenya. We see here that Nigeria and its close neighbor, Ghana, are featured in the central western region of the continent. Nigeria also happens to be the largest in population at 140 million, followed by Egypt at 78 and South Africa at 49 million. Kenya has 39 million people, compared to Ghana, the neighbor of Nigeria, that has only 24 million people. And the smallest of the countries, Madagascar, has 17.6 million in population. Start thinking about which country stuck out in your mind the most. Which one were you most interested in? For example, did you pair Nigeria and its neighbor Ghana to the west? Or did you overview and review the Egypt and its polar opposite South Africa? From this map, we can see that the majority of the countries that received Partnership in Higher Education in Africa funding were located in the southwestern sector of the continent, including Madagascar. For example, I focused more on Nigeria because it was the largest in population at 149 million. Also, the funding provided modernized infrastructure and equipment and labs. Madagascar sparked my imagination because of its biodiversity and unique species that may only be found in that area. The funding contributed to oceanic studies and research and provided boats and GPS and microscopes. The biology department holds 70,000 different species. In fact, Africa produced about 27,000 scientific papers per year between 1999 and 2008. That is as much as the Netherlands' output for the same time period. In 9 countries, a combined population of 459 million people, the Partnership in Higher Education in Africa directly and indirectly improved conditions for 4.1 million students at 379 universities and colleges. From this chart, we can see that South Africa received 124 million, or the bulk of the funding, followed by Nigeria receiving 61 million, Uganda receiving 43 million, and the smallest, Madagascar, received 2 million. Overall, South Africa was the largest single country to benefit from the grant making, and that is because 5 of the 7 foundations were active there. But now there is a renewed interest, a renewed emphasis on the next generation of academics. From this chart, we can see that the gross national income, or GDP per capita, shows that South Africa, that received the majority of the funding, has a 15% tertiary rate. This compares to Egypt, that has a 30% enrollment rate. I focused on Nigeria and Madagascar, which had a 10% and a 3.4% tertiary enrollment rate. Tanzania and Mozambique had the smallest tertiary enrollment rate at 1.5%. Comparatively, however, Nigeria, with the largest population receiving the second largest contribution, had many more universities and have a 10.2% tertiary enrollment rate. Madagascar wasn't doing too badly at the 1 university and a 3.4% tertiary enrollment rate. Again, weaving success, looking at issues related to access, quality, and finance. What were the outcomes? Enduring improvements in African higher education, increased resources for African institutions, collectively the added value beyond what individual foundations could do alone, the enhanced individual foundation efforts. Among the foundation successes included a top 10 list. Highlights from that included the Bandwidth Consortium, the ETI Technology Initiative, the Higher Education Research and Advocacy Network in Africa, the AFNOG, Africa Network Operators Group, that trained engineers in the bandwidth area, the Journal of Higher Education in Africa, and the University Leaders Forum. The triple helix provided for the public good. The transformation hinged on the university teaching and research being aligned with government anti-poverty efforts. Weaving success demonstrated and showed replete with graphic illustrations of the people who were helped from Uganda, Ghana, and Nigeria. Also, increasing the teacher training program is essential for the next generation. The gender equity and enrollment and graduation rates improved. The Women's Undergraduate Scholarship received 71%. Between July 2001 and April 2005, the program awarded $10 million in scholarships. More than 1,000 women benefited. 95 graduates to date, and a dropout rate below 2% shows that the partnership has an unqualified success story. Moving on to vision and strategy. Strategies to increase the university access for marginalized groups in higher education were in place. And the universities established systems for strategic planning, financial management, quality assurance, library automation, and resource mobilization. But there is still the challenge of the shortage of resources and PhD human capital. For example, 167% student increase at the University of Ghana. Finance partnership example is the Northern Nigeria Bayero University in Kano. The MacArthur Foundation put up half the funds for an information technology building, and the university leveraged its relationships with private companies to generate the rest of the funds and finish the center with computers and hardware. Moving forward, the future trends and the next generation. I will close with a quote from Najubolo Ndebele, the Vice-Chancellor Emeritus from the University of Cape Town. Weaving Success portrays the participative environment to provide fresh insights for political leaders, government policymakers, and private sector leaders in Africa and elsewhere. For those on the lookout for long-term engagement with African higher education, Weaving Success opens up new prospects for collaboration. And now we will move on to the discussion questions.